Easter morn.
So, my dear ones, Easter, and I bet some of you already had Easter eggs and Easter bunnies. I know it. I just know it. So welcome into this celebration today, and let us know that Easter is as much for you and for me today as it was for those first people who witnessed it 2,000 years ago, because it wouldn't be Easter if we didn't know that. All over the world, there are millions of people celebrating Easter now, as we are too. And we are going to that deeper metaphysical level of awareness and understanding of what it means in your life and in my life today. Because heaven knows we are not just celebrating one particular person, although it be a glorious one, who lived 2,000 years ago. His life, the life of the great, masterful, and enlightened Jesus, would have very little meaning if that didn't affect us here and now. And that was his intention. And so you have to understand and realize and remember that Christianity is outside of the purvey of Jesus. Jesus was not a Christian, is what I'm saying. He never knew he was a Christian, didn't want to be a Christian, was happy to be a Jew, albeit a very iconoclastic Jew, as I was saying this morning, one who balked against the letter of the law and said, listen, you guys, you're killing the spirit of the law with your insistence upon its letter. There are so many rules and regulations to be obeyed by the Jewish community that no one could succeed in obeying them all in one day. That's how many there are. And so Jesus became very universal in his outreach and in his approach, and suggested to us all, in heaven, in higher conscious awareness, there is no Jew, there is no Gentile. There is just the one expression of spirit in all of God's creation, in every part and particle of it. And so, naturally, he was challenged, and he wasn't very well liked by the establishment, to say the least. So when you are misunderstood, remember you're in great good company. And when everybody is shaking their sabers at you, remember you're in great good company. And so we do as the Master showed us how to do. We maintain our poise, we maintain our center, and we do not get troubled by the 10,000 at one side and the other 1,000 at the other side that wants to really annihilate us and do away with us because we're a thorn in the flesh. And so we do it, though, of course, with that equanimity and with that poise and with that serenity and with that absolute faith in knowing that everything is happening the way it's supposed to happen. But you have to be so strong to be able to withstand that. Now, the strength that Jesus had was his because he became consciously Christed. Each and every one of us are born Christed, but not consciously so. We have to wake up and remember again that we are Christed individuals. So how did he do it? Because he was not the great exception. He was the great example to us all. Jesus' meaning wouldn't have much meaning for anything or anyone if he was just the exception, because it would be impossible to emulate the exception. We can emulate, however, the example, and that's what he was. And so he really, he drove that home, although it wasn't driven home to us when we grew up in Christianity, that you too can do these things that I have done, and greater things than I have done can you do as well. How would we do that? Well, we'd have to achieve a higher state of consciousness than Jesus did. That's how we could do greater things. But he's saying everything is possible because you are, as Ernest Holmes says, you are the unlimited possibility of life, and yours is the privilege of giving birth to that. Yours is the privilege of experiencing that and allowing that. How do we do that? The same way Jesus did it. He did not over-identify with his humanity, and to the extent that he stopped identifying with his humanity and identified it more with his divinity, that's how he became consciously Christed, because all the stuff of the human personality and egoic machinations of it all didn't affect him. These things did not move him. He did not give them any power or any attention. He focused on the Father and I are one. He who sees me sees the Father. That's what he focused on. He had managed to get in touch with the power within him that was greater than he was. The power within him that was greater than he was, and he identified with that. And because he did, he could do what we call miracles, which are not miracles at all. They're not supernatural. They're natural supers. They're natural supers. And you've experienced a natural super here and there. Things that we can't explain, you know? We can't explain it at all. But we don't have to. And as I was saying this morning, I can know something deeply within myself without understanding it. For example, math. I don't understand everything about math. But I really do know that there is a law of mathematics, and it works. Same with the law of gravity, or any of these laws that I haven't really studied and become masterful in. I don't have to do that to know they exist, and they're a very real and present help for me if I need to call upon that law, you see. And so this is the way Jesus was able to realize who he was and what he was and how he was. And so that's what Easter is all about, reminding you and reminding me there's something always in me and you that wants to rise up out of this terrible weightiness that we placed upon ourselves through over-identification with our personality selves, our egoic selves, our human selves, and limited ourselves into this very narrow and small box. And so consequently think nothing's going right. It's not happening the way I wanted to happen. When I was young, little did I think I'd arrive here and be at this stage. I expected blah, 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 because I'm only going as far as the borders of the box will allow me to go. Consciousness, consciousness, consciousness. I can only go like water to my own level. Water finds its own level, and so does my consciousness. It finds its own level too. It can only go, what I experience and what I imagine for my life can only go as far as my conscious reach. That's all I know further. Now, everybody else around me may be able to expand that and do better and more wonderfully well than I am. That's because they are moving their consciousness up and out and deep and beyond where I am. It's not they're any better than I am, being given anything more than I have. They haven't. There's not one person on this planet that is superior to anybody else, believe it or not, although some might think so. And there's not one person on this planet that is lower than anybody else, believe it or not, though some might think so. We're all of the same ilk, the same essence, the same substance. And everything is possible to each and every one of us. Now, we must not judge by appearances either. You know, people say, well, if you're so hotsy-totsy, how come this is going on in your life and that's going on in your life and the other's going on in your life? Well, of course, somebody who says that is demonstrating to you they haven't a clue. They really haven't a clue. They don't understand how life works. And so there's no comparing and contrasting. Some of us, I said on Friday, some of the greatest saints had the most horrible, awful diseases, dreadful diseases. I mean, and they were full of joy, and it didn't trouble them, and it didn't matter to them, because they knew they were not the body. And the body was being used in a certain way because they were open to it, to bring an understanding of kindness and compassion and joy in spite of difficulty to the world or whatever. Each one of us shows up in our own way to serve in some way, even the ones that get on our very last nerve, especially the ones who get on our very last nerve. They are our greatest teachers. They bring us our greatest gifts, as much as we wouldn't like that. I was reading about an Episcopalian minister this morning, and she was saying there was one fellow in the congregation that got on her last nerve. And she knew that she had to get over this, and she would make the endeavor and tell herself that she would. The fellow would walk in and she would say, I wish you'd drop dead, in her own mind. That's what our personality was saying, but the godliness within her was saying, now, good Reverend, pull it together, wish this man well, bless this man. And she said it took her forever to do that, but eventually she got there. But in the beginning, every time the person entered her energetic field, she would always want to say, get lost or something like that. her personality self. But again, she was giving way more and more and more to the divine aspect of her being, and eventually she was able to overcome. But here's the thing, of ourselves we can't do it. Like the woman whose son, and I was sharing that on Friday, whose son, 17-year-old son, was killed by a drunken driver, and she hated that man, I cannot tell you, so vehemently. And she was a good religious person and went to church every Sunday and so on. The minister would tell her, you got to forgive, you got to forgive. I don't want to, I can't, and I'm not. I hope he dies. That was how it went on for her for 2 solid years. After that, she realized she was killing herself. And so then she talked with her minister, and she was able to go from, I cannot and I won't do this, to, I really am thinking now that I want to do this, please God help. And from that moment, you see, things began to open up within her. Her heart began to soften and so on. It took her a while, but eventually she got there. The moral of the story is, of myself I cannot do it. Of myself I can do nothing. It's only when you invite the power that is greater than you are, that is you, in true essence, to come and support you and to rise up that integrative understanding and awareness of life, that you and I can forgive, that you and I can truly love, that you and I can be of a very real and present help on this planet. And it's all about that. Being in that close relationship with Source. That's how Jesus did it. He had this amazing relationship with the source of his being. He was all the time in communication with his Father, what he called the source of his being, the lover of his soul, the provider of his good, in whom he had absolute trust. And he did it so simply and without struggle or effort or anything else. He didn't go into big, long treatments. He didn't go into big contemplations and diatribes and conversations with the power that be. He just would remember, I'm full of amazing grace and it's all around and about me. The Father is ever the thinking in my mind and the feeling in my heart and the doer in my life. So what he would say would be, thank you, because we're always very grateful when we have these experiences. Thank you, Father, that you hear me, that you always hear me. Thank you. Now, Lazarus, come forth. And he did. Thank you, Father, that you always hear me. Bless the bread. Everyone was fed. And this is something that's not just pertaining to Jesus alone. I just read of a man recently, a Jesuit priest down in Mexico, who provides all kinds of sustenance for prisoners and the poorest of the poor and so on. And every time they are feeding the hungry, they may have enough food for 100. And maybe 400 will show up. And he'll say, okay, Father, this is it. Make sure everybody gets fed. Make sure all the hungry get fed. And they always get fed. Even though there's enough food for 100, by the time they've finished, they've fed the 400. You see? So this is not just something that only a Jesus could do. You can do it too. You can do it too with that kind of faith. And you've had experiences of that. You may not be tuned into it. You may not remember it, but you have had experiences of impossible things happening, or what we think is impossible. I didn't think it could happen, but it did. And somehow or another, it's because we're in tune with something greater than ourselves. And we know that it's impossible for ourselves to do it. And there's a beautiful, beautiful opportunity when your back is up against the wall, when you can do nothing else, when you don't know what to do, when you're down on your knees and there's nothing else to do except trust the source of your being. And then you hand it up, you give it over, you surrender it. You surrender it, and then the help comes. Because here's the thing about the lover of your soul. The lover of your soul will not come to you uninvited. It must be invited. It will not impose. You have to want it. You have to welcome it. You have to receive it. You have to extend the invitation, or it's not going to impose. And so that's why we say, okay, we're called to court the presence of God. But the only reason why we're called to court the presence of God is because God's presence is always courting us, but we don't court back. And it's because we don't court back that we have to be told, for God's sake, invite the presence of God into your life, into your awareness. Court the presence. What does that mean? Be consciously aware of your lover, the lover of your soul. Be consciously aware. For those of you who have known love, for those of you who have fallen into human love, you know what that was like in its incipiency. You couldn't get enough of each other. Oh my gosh, you couldn't get enough of each other. You only had eyes for each other. People who look at you in a crowd say, oh, for God's sake, get a room. You know, that stage where you only have eyes for each other and you're very attentive and you're thinking about them all the time. Now, what can I do to make them happy? What can I do to put a smile on their face? What can I do to make them feel good? What can I do for my lover? What can I do? And it was all about, what can I do for? What can I do for? What can I do? 20 years later, what can he do for me? What can she do for me? You see. So the whole idea is to stay in the awareness of what it was like when you first woke up in love with your spouse. What that was like. And I say to couples all the time, go back to what that felt like then. Resurrect that feeling that you felt then. It's like the master teachers have always said to us when we first had the robes laid upon our shoulders. They would say, when you're tired, when you're weary, when you're down, when you're out, go back to your robe and touch your robe and feel the way you felt the moment it was placed on your shoulders. And you will be raised up. You will be picked up. So it's the same with anything in your life and in mine. Go back to the incipiency of the good that was experienced and the feeling that went with it, and let it wash over you like amazing grace, and let it resurrect you up into knowing how blessed you are to have brought this person into your life, or whatever the situation is. Go back to when you felt young and vibrant and vital, and you could hop and skip and jump and climb every mountain and ford every stream. Go back to the feeling of that when you're sick and sorry and sore, and let that be infused into every cell of your body and resurrect the intelligence in your body that knows exactly how to take care of business. It's the same thing about your adventuresome self when you used to love adventures and going out and taking risks and doing all of that. Go back to that time, regain its energy, and go forth again, resurrected into the knowledge and the understanding, I haven't changed. I have not changed. Nothing about me has changed. Nothing of the truth of me ever changes. The body may change, but I don't change. The I am of me doesn't change. It becomes, in fact, more glorious every time I recognize it, every time I remember it, every time I honor it, every time I embrace it, every time I stand tall and sovereign in it, every time I regain the sovereignty of the truth of my being, that allows me to move through my life regardless of what's going on around and about me, and be all that I can be. And when I'm doing that, I am so raising the energy on the planet, bringing it up. I'm adding to its health, to its well-being, to its healing. When I do that, when I can forgive and truly forgive, release and relax and let go and let God, oh my goodness, if there were chorus of angels that you could see, they'd be whooping it up for you. They'd be lauding you, and they would be applauding you every time that happens, because you have those energies there that are a very real and present help. We cannot see them. That's why we feel so jazzed sometimes. You think it's because of you? No, it's because all of the wonderful supportive energy within you, around you, about you, above you, and below you. God, by means of you, is always desiring to be on the move, upward, forward, outward, under, over, and all of that jazz. It is a glorious thing to be alive. It's an amazing, unique, and very rare gift to be gifted with life. Out of all of the bazillions of possibilities that could have been chosen, you were chosen. for spirit to show up by means of you and express itself and know itself and be itself by means of you. You've already achieved your highest accomplishment, and that is it, and nothing else could ever top that one. So give yourselves a round of applause, because you deserve it. A round of applause and a high five, because you are the image, the likeness, and the face of the Christ upon this earth in human form. That's what you are, and you're not your lacks, your limitations. You're not your faults. You're not your failings. Remember, every saint has had a past, and every sinner has a future. That's the way of it in this three-dimensional plane, planet Earth, which is a wonderful school of learning. It's kind of sort of kindergarten, however. So let's not get too uppity about ourselves when we think about how wonderful we are and how spiritually advanced we are. You see, it's kindergarten here. Now, that's not to say that kindergartners cannot touch the very face of God, the heart of God, and be the beauty and grace that they are. I learn best from kindergartners. I learn best from those small individualized expressions of spirit. Remember, babies come in fully orbed beings. They just have to be squished into this little body of lack and limitation until they're able to breathe and say, oh, for God's sake, I thought I never could speak, because listen, this doesn't work for me, that doesn't work for me, etc., etc., etc. So God, by means of you, is on the rise, on the march. You've got to make your song a march and not a funeral dirge, as some of us would do. You look at some of us and you would think vinegar was flowing through the veins and not blood, as they dirge their way through this precious thing called life. And you see more of them, and they're marching like at the Sousa March, and I love that. And they're not marching off through war at all. They're marching into celebration. They're marching into life, and they want to bring everything with them. Everything with them. That's the thing about spiritually unfolding. You want it for everything and everyone. It's not just about you anymore. It's about every aspect of life and living that shows up in and through and by means of you, because each one of us is everything and everyone. And everything and everyone is each one of us. Like it or lump it, that's the truth, and it's an amazing truth, and it's the only thing that brings us together and unifies us. On Saturday next, we are going to be having a unity breakfast. We are going to be having an interfaith unity breakfast. We are going to be showing up to create a vortex of energy that is peaceful energy, so that that can be a blessing that's sent out to the world. If you really want to put your spiritual money where your spiritual mouth is, you will show up, and so will I, at these invitations and make the difference. So I am knowing that we will have a wonderful energy center here next Saturday as we come together to know, to understand, to love, and to be one as we were created to be, and so it is.